the beautiful island of Puerto Rico, and I thought that's where my ministry was going to be for forever. But God, in His wisdom, said, "All right, no, you're going somewhere else." So He took me to Oregon. I'm trying to use the clicker, not sure that it's working. Like, let's see. There it is. No, it's not working. Yep. Yeah, it's green, right? So maybe you could just follow me over there. Is that okay? So, a lot that I have learned reaching next generations has been through church planting. Because when you're starting from scratch, where there's no church in different places, there's something about young people trying to that they're to try new things. We started with a small group right there that you can see in Portland, Oregon, and after a year and a half, God had blessed our church with around 140 people attending every single Sabbath. And the great majority of the people were young people. Thank you, sir. Um, Maybe up there in the cabin, AV team. Do I give you a signal or something so we can change? All right, let's do that. So yeah, let's move along. From 2020 started with 20 young people, and God blessed us reaching by the year, almost 2 years, 140 people in attendance. The great majority were young people, the next generation. We realized that the place that we were there in Southeast Portland, we could not have more people. It was full. People wouldn't come anymore because there was not enough space. And we weren't a really large church. It was 140 people. But instead of doing something else, we sent 10 of those young people to the west side of Portland. And there we planted another church with these young people that wanted to invest in their community, that wanted to reach the people, that wanted to give their lives to those who were around them, who wanted to reach their friends, their family members. They invested heavily. And I started seeing like this trend. I started understanding how the next generation started thinking and what actually attracted them. While I was there in Portland for around 12 years, God called us to another place that hadn't been before. That church grew a bit. We launched in an Italian restaurant in Southwest Portland. The church grew a bit, and then God called me to Denver, Colorado. And in Denver, Colorado, we lived right there in downtown in a historical neighborhood called Five Points. And then again, more young people. Young people that wanted to invest, next generation that wanted to do something significant, that young people that were daring enough to do something difficult. And God blessed us again. And we launched a church there in downtown Denver. Again, the great majority young people, younger generation. It had been around almost 15 years since I had been working with the North American division here in the States, where when God did something that I thought he wouldn't do, he called me to Puerto Rico. He called me to Puerto Rico. Careful with what you ask. I remember telling my wife the only way I'll go back to Puerto Rico to pastor if God gives me a vision like He gave Daniel, and I am fallen to the ground and I don't eat for a few days. Careful what you wish for, because God did something very special. He took me to the second largest city in Puerto Rico called Ponce, Puerto Rico. And then again, more young people that were wanting, willing, to reach their community, to serve, to invest, to not only give their time, but also share their talents, share their treasure, their money, their finances in reaching other people. And this was a very significant experience because this time around, I knew the people I was serving. I understood the culture, of course, the language. It's my first language. It was easier to understand and to apply some of the principles that we're going to share during the day to reach young people. And then again, the church grew. When we launched the church, we launched the church with 229 people. And here's a picture of where we launched. We launched in this hacienda. It was outdoors. God blessed us there for 2 years in a very tropical Puerto Rico with not a single day that the rain interrupted our service. It was incredible. And I realized that there was a pattern. There was something there was a pattern. There were some principles. So today, as we share, in the afternoon, we're going to share some strategies of how we could reach the next generation. Now, how many of you like to think strategically? Raise your hand with me if you like to think strategically. All right, there's two people that like to think strategically. All right, but when we're talking about strategy, there's something very important for us to know, very important for us to understand, and it's this quote right here that I want to share. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Can you repeat that with me? All the way from the back up to the front, let's repeat it together. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So what do we mean by this? If we share a strategy, but our strategy is not aligned with our culture, our strategy will always fail. Regardless of how good the strategy is and regardless how well we implement it. Let me give you an example. I was preaching in the Northwest at the University of Walla Walla to the students. And we were preaching there for a week. And on Sabbath, they had this student thing that I was preaching in the evening. I didn't have to preach in the morning. So I thought, all right, I am going to go to a local church. So I thought, so I could get fed. Maybe someone will invite me to lunch. That's what I thought. And I thought, I'm here in the Northwest. You know what I would like? I would like to try some homemade Mexican food. So I thought, there's a Spanish church. So I looked at in the GPS. It took me right there to the Spanish church. And when I looked from outside, I couldn't really see a sign that identified that it was an Adventist church. So I thought to myself, am I in the right spot? I looked at the GPS. It said I was. I stood there in the car for a little bit, but I said, I'm going to go in. So I looked around, and I was going around the building. There were many doors, and I didn't know where was the main door. And as I'm looking around, it's like, well, I'll just try this one. And when I opened the door, for some reason, there was an entire class sitting down facing the door that I just opened. And I was so surprised, I just closed it back and I went back to my car. And I sat down and I thought, where am I? Am I in the wrong place? And I mustered the courage to go back into the building. And I said, all right, maybe I'll just open the door and I'll scoot in. And when I opened the door again, the people were gone. No one. And I thought, man, I must be very, very hungry. What is this? I opened the door and I went inside the building and I started looking around, wondering where were the people. I know that there were people here, so I started looking and I heard some singing, so I followed the singing. And I took myself inside the sanctuary. Everybody was singing and I sat down and I was there for around 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours. And they were sharing, and that during the announcements, that they were getting ready for an evangelistic campaign. And the evangelistic campaign started next week. And I was sitting there in the back, listening and hearing. And as they announced it, and they went through the entire service, everybody stood up after the service and left. And not a single person even said hi to me. Not a single person said hi. Nobody approached me. Nobody said, how are you doing? Where are you from? Not a single person. So what were they working on? They were working on their strategy, their evangelism strategy. But their culture was somewhere else. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So their culture was inward. Evangelism strategy was outward. That's in theory, they wanted to reach others. But in reality, their culture was about them, not about anybody else. They weren't expecting anybody. They weren't announcing and making it easy for people to find a church. Nobody was at the door receiving anyone. Then nobody even went to say, oh, who are you? Where are you coming from? No one. You see, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So as I am going to share with you in this afternoon some strategy, I was thinking, one of the things that I don't like, and probably you don't like either, I don't like to waste my time. Because I think time is like the most precious thing. You could earn money, but you could never earn your time back, right? And as I'm here during this this Sabbath, I hope that what I share will be helpful, very helpful. That so much so that you're able to apply some of the principles and that God could use you to reach the next generation for his kingdom. So, if this is true, if culture eats strategy for breakfast, then how do we go about it? Well, we need to understand what is our culture as a church, and we need to understand what creates culture. So this is what we're going to share. The best way for us to identify and understand and change and shape and modify our culture is by identifying our values. Identifying our values as a church. Because we can say, like that Spanish church that was preparing for evangelism, oh yes, we're going to have this evangelistic thing and we're going to reach many people. Where in reality, why would God send anyone there? Why would he? I wouldn't send my son there. Why? So the same way, we need to think about, all right, what is our values? What are our values as a church? We need to tell ourselves the truth in order to understand our culture and align our culture with our strategy. So what are core values? What are core values? So core values explain who you are. As not only personal values explain who we are, but corporately, we know who we are because of our values, your identity. They are the very building blocks of our DNA, of your ministry. Explain what you do or what you don't do or what you should do. That they form the foundation on which mission and vision are built. Along with them, they form the core ideology of who we are as a church. Not only what we believe as Seventh-day Adventists, but who we are as Riverview Adventist Church. So that's why values are incredibly, incredibly important. When you look at the first church there, the church of Jerusalem, they considered core values important. Luke says that they devoted themselves to those core values. They devoted to prayer. They devoted to each other, to breaking bread. They devoted to serving each other. They devoted themselves to the listening of the message of Jesus through the disciples. Those were very important, very core values. And because of those values, were aligned with the strategy that Jesus gave them the Holy Spirit was able to move through them. So the most important single element of any congregation is who we are. Who we are. What do we actually value? Now I want to share some reasons why values are important. And why would we want to share values? Because when we're able to look at our strategy, some principles that you decide how are you going to apply, what you value is going to directly affect them. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to share with you some of the importance of the values first. Secondly, I'm going to share with you a process of how you can, as a church, discover and identify those values. And then in the afternoon, we will come together around strategy. So 9 reasons values are important. So our values determine ministry distinctives. When I was coming here, I think I saw, at least from the hotel here, at least 5 churches on my way here. In 22 minutes from a trip here, there were at least 5 churches. And most people are willing to travel around 20 minutes to a church. So why would anyone choose Riverview Adventist Church? Why won't they go to the whole gospel church that I saw not too far from here? Why would they go here? So it's very important for us to understand that the values determine the ministry distinctives, because not 2 churches are alike. Even though they may be Seventh-day Adventist Church, that doesn't mean that they are the same. They may believe in some of the same doctrines, but not 2 churches are the same. Also, values determine the personal involvement that people have with the church. Depending on the values that the church has, that the church lives, is going to determine if people are going to be involved with the church and the level of involvement that they will have, depending on the values, what you actually value. For some reason, let me see. If you can help me again, sorry. For some reason, it left me here. You changed it. All right. No, you could go back. You could go back. I was not done with the previous one. But in the presentation here, the controller, some reason just closed. Is asking for a password or something. All right, thank you. Number 3, values determine, and they determine what is important. What do you value as a church? What is important for you as a church? This is what we stand for. This is what we're all about. This is who we are. This is what we can and cannot do. I have, after pastoring and launching a church in Puerto Rico, God in his sense of humor called me back to the States. And he called me to Maryland. I had never lived on the east side of the States. And it's a very interesting church. It's a large church of 1,200 members. And as I'm the lead pastor for the church, and as I'm sharing with them, I started understanding what is it that they value. So as I understand their story, and I went through this process that I'm going to share with them, I realized that one of the highest, if not the highest value of the church is not, you know what it is children. They have a high value for children. You know, when I discovered that, when I started learning about the history of the church. When they first planted the church, instead of building a temple, you know what they built first? They built a school. They built a school. The Bellsville Adventist Church there in Maryland, they built a school. And for many years, they gathered, instead of a nice building, they gathered in the gymnasium. Because for them, the value of children was very high. So what type of people do you think they attracted to the church? Parents, right? Parents with young children, because that was a high value with them, because values determine what is important. So when we discover our values, it tells us collectively, this is what we're here for. This is what we truly value. This is what's important for us. This is what we can offer the community. So there's another good reason why values are very important. Number 4, if you can help me upstairs. Values help us embrace good change. Values help us understand good change. So how many of us here would like to see the church grow? Raise your hand if you would like to see the church grow. Okay, all right, put your hand down. I'm going to ask you a second question. How many of you here would like to experience pain? No? It's a huge part. There's a great book by Dr. Samuel Chand, and I'm going to share just the premise of this book. He says that growth equals change. If you're going to grow, it means that something has to change personally, collectively, as a family, as a church, as a corporation, any organization, any individual that wants to grow needs to change. So growth equals change, but change equals loss. When you change, you lose something in order to obtain something else. You stop doing something, you stop investing in something, when you grow, when you say you want to grow, you change, therefore you lose something. But loss equals pain. So growth equals change, change equals loss, loss equals pain. Therefore, growth equals pain. We all want to grow, but we don't want to hurt. So when we identify our values, we realize that we can embrace good change. We can embrace that which aligns with our values, and then we reject those things that do not align with our values. For example, if our value was convenience and commodity, then it would be a very hard thing. For example, for the Beltsville Church, if they were wanting to grow, if they valued commodity or comfort, they would have built first their building. They had the money to do it. But because their value was their children, families, then they invested in a different way. They changed. So they were able to embrace good change. So that's why value is so important. Collectively, if you're going to reach the next generation, you need to decide how much do you really value them. Do we really value them? And if you really value them, then you need to say, okay, if we value next generation and we want to grow, then what needs to change because of what we value? And with that is going to come loss, and with that is going to come pain. Because that's part of growth. It always is. So when we value something, it influences overall behavior. It's very, very strong. Behavior is very, very strong. So if I come as a pastor to my church in Maryland and say, you know what, from now on, we're not going to have any more our children's story. How do you think that's going to go? It's not going to go pretty well, right? I don't think so. Because the church has some certain values that influences their behavior. So values dictate every decision and influence every action, right down to the way we think, the manner in which we execute those actions. Everything that we do. So if we're going to reach next generations, if we're truly going to reach them, we need to be able to say, okay, how is our value going to influence our behavior? How are we willing to modify our behavior, our decisions, our budget? How are we going to work with that? Because values influence absolutely everything. They affect our decisions, our goals, our priorities, our budget, our problem solving, our conflict resolution, everything. So if we're going to reach effectively, if we're going to apply a strategy that reaches next generations, we need to identify what is shaping our culture. And what shapes our culture are our values. What is it that we truly value collectively as a group of people? Values are so important because they inspire people to action or not. Whatever you value can inspire people or could turn people off, turn people away. So last church I planted in Puerto Rico, we would share constantly our vision. Our vision was very, very simple. And I realized that as we shared our vision, it was so impactful for people that our vision attracted some people and it also filtered some people out. This was our vision. Our vision was to love without barriers. So that we're going to love people regardless of what they look like, of where they come from, their walk of life, their party of preference. We were just going to love people without barriers. And intentionally, we would make sure that there's no barriers that would help, that would impede for us loving people. Secondly, our vision is to love without barriers, to serve without prejudice. That we were a church that we're going to serve people without prejudice, regardless if they were serving an addict or if we're serving someone that's very affluent, but we were there to serve people. And we were intentionally going to be a church that would have no prejudice to anyone that wanted to come and to be part of our community. And thirdly, we were committed to leading like Jesus. That meant that politics had no place in our community because we were going to lead like Jesus. So what happened when we started sharing this, because these are the things that we valued, we saw that was very attractive for some people, but it was a repellent for other people. So people that were highly political and wanted to join a new church, to have a position and rub shoulders and push other people out, they were turned off by it because those were our values. But the people that felt that they wanted to love others, they wanted a church to love without barriers, they wanted a church that served without prejudice, they wanted a church that led like Jesus, then this type of people, they were highly attracted. So your values are going to inspire others. But what are they? What are they? Number 7, your values enhance credible leadership. If we say we are a church that loves children, but when we look at our budget, there is nothing allocated for children, is that really a value? Not really. You may say that it's a value. It may be an aspirational value, but it's not really a value. But when you live out a value, it enhances credible leadership. So at times, this is a little painful, but when I look at the budget of our church, I realize that more of a third of its budget is dedicated for a student aid. Why? Because that's a high value for the church. They value children, they value their education, so they put their money where their mouth is, right? Because that's their value. So we have credibility as leaders because we're not just giving lip service, but we actually are doing what we say we value. So values are very important, because if it's the most important leaders that model a lifestyle consistent with those values, super important. Leadership that aligns with solid beliefs invites credibility. So that Spanish church that I told you that I went and that we're preparing for evangelism, do you think a guest that comes and has the same experience believes the leadership? No credibility. Because they say that they were ready to do something, they say that they value something, but with their actions, their culture says something else. Because culture eats strategies for breakfast. Number 8, values are important because they contribute to ministry success. An inspired community of believers who are united in a common cause is enthusiastic. People come together. They want to serve. They have strong influence with their church members. And this has nothing to do with generations and age. It has to do with what people truly value. The last church that we planted in Puerto Rico with young people, it's incredible because in that conference, the average age of an Adventist is 65 years old. The average age of the population is 39 years old. So there was a disconnection, and people would say, oh, it's a hard territory. People are not responding. That was not the case. That was not the case. The case was that there weren't a community that valued the next generation enough to do something that would grow them, that would change them, that they would experience loss and actual pain in order to reach the people. So why do I tell you this? One of the first leaders that aligned with us and says, I am in, I want to do something, I believe in the next generation, was a friend actually from Wisconsin that had lived all his life in Puerto Rico, and his name is Rob Mariner, and he was 82 years old. And he was not just saying that. You know, he was our elder. He was the first one in the meetings. He directed our Pathfinders. He was the most supportive person, because for him, the next generation was a high value. Every time that a young person walked inside the doors, he received them. He was like the grandpa for all of our kids. They loved him. They invited out to lunch, for coffee. They talked with him. They spent time with him because he loved them a whole lot. So my friend, when we value something, regardless of our age, of our generation, we have a great influence of others. Great influence. And number 9, our values determine our mission and our vision. The church's values are foundational to its mission and vision. The shared values influence and determine what they are. So it is important for every church to understand what is it that we truly value. And in that process, we need to tell ourselves the truth. Because at times we could say, oh, yes, you know, we value other people. We value, it's like almost every church will say that they are missional. Almost every church would say, oh, no, we are missional. We're here to reach the lost. But not every church is willing to pay the price to reach the lost. Because at times, convenience, comfort, tradition are higher values than actually being about the mission and reaching the lost. So in the process, we need to tell us the truth collectively, and there are processes that we can go through as a church in order to discover collectively our values. And I want to share one of them with you. This is from a book by Aubrey Malphus. He is a strategic ministry expert, and in his book, Advanced Strategic Planning, he shares like 3 different ways that a congregation can discover their values. This one is my favorite one because I've used it time after time with all of my churches. I've used it with consulting from other churches, and I see the great benefit that it brings. So I'm going to share with this process briefly, and then if you have any questions, we'll take those because we're out when we have 8 minutes to with our time. So he calls this, Aubrey Malfres calls this storyboarding. It's a storyboarding session. So here's a way, practical way, step by step of how, as a church, we can identify our values. So let's say this is a group that we're going, this is a good, would you say, I don't know your church, you know your church, is this a good representation of our church, of the Riverview Church? Good representation right here? Leaders and such? Okay, let's say this is we're doing this with this group. So here's how this would work. We would begin with a brainstorming activity, which involves creative thinking. So we want to have the core team, you right here. We're going to take a personal values audit. And each one does a personal values audit. And in his book, Aubrey Malfres has a personal values audit that you could go and do. And everybody does it. And you check what are your personal values in a questionnaire. And then afterwards, you share it. Oh, this is what I value. These are my top 5 values. 1, 2, 3, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are my top values. After you do that, then the church takes, collectively, the leaders, they take a church audit, a church value audit. And you take it, and everybody fills it out. It takes maybe 10 minutes. And then you compare your personal values audit with the church's values audit. The interesting thing is that the two audits are exactly the same. And you're able to contrast what is my personal value with the collective value that we have as a church. So here's what we do. After you go through that process, you're able to see, okay, this, if once you have your 5 values, top values, you compare it with the 5 top values that you sign with your church, for your church, that you know that your church has, and you compare it. And it's interesting because most times, for some reason, the personal values are not aligned with the church values. And if that is so, then we have a problem. Then we need to realize, okay, where are we not aligned and how can we align? So how do we go about identifying collectively, after we do it individually, our personal values, our church values individually, we do. Now how we go about it collectively. And here's what we do. We take a lot of postcards, that's what it's, Post-it notes, that's it, Post-it notes. Get a whiteboard, and you ask the people, all of us here, tell me what do you think, and this is a brainstorming session. Nobody gets to say, oh no, that's not a value. Everybody's able to participate, and everything goes, all right? And everybody says, oh, I think our church values X, Y, Z. So let's do like a little example. If you would have to say there's one thing that the church values, your church, what would it be? Who could raise their hand and say, I think this is one of our values? Visitors. Who else? Young people. My friend in the back. Unity. Okay, so we take those postcards and we put unity, young people, children, and we put those postcards in a board. And everybody gets to participate. And whoever's leading should press people to say, okay, what else? What else? What else do you think is a value? Until there's no one else sharing. And we can fill the board with those little note cards. What is it again? Post-it notes. Those are. So, and until nobody else has something that they want to say. And then we say, okay, you give each person participating 5 stickers, little red stickers, some round stickers, and you ask everybody to go to the board and put the 5 top. You stick a little sticker in the Post-it notes to the values that you think are the most important as a church, collectively, right? All the group that's participating. And when you do that, after you have everybody put their stickers, you count which of those values has the most amount of stickers. And like that, you're able to identify what is it that you value and what is it that you value most. Why this is important, my friend? Because when you identify what you value, and you have to be sincere, right? Doing this practice, you'll be able to say, okay, if this is what we value, what needs to change in order for us to live out this value? What can we do as a church? How can we truly be, how can we be faithful to this value that we have as a church? What does our budget have to reflect? How does our ministry have to look like? We have to ask ourselves, for example, are those valued inward-focused values or outward-focused values? Are values that just for ourselves, or are these our values that for the people that we're trying to reach? And once you do that, then you're able to think about strategy. Then you're able to implement other things because you know what you truly, truly value. And every time you meet, every time you prepare, you have your values there. And you look for ways to share those values effectively, not only with your congregation, but also with the community. Because odds are that people around you will also value those things. And the people that value what God has called you to be as a church will come. The ministries will be aligned with them. The ideas, the budget, the calendar will be aligned with those values as well. All right, I'm going to leave 2 minutes for questions. 2 minutes for questions before we go into the next part of our service. Yes, sir.
Clarification, which is a little bit different than just counting.
Can you repeat that again?
In your ministry, have you ever used those exercises that they target value clarification?
Yes.
That go beyond just counting what people's responses are, but actually providing questions that help them to gain insight into their own
values.
mind.
Yes, this is a very good resource. I know that he's written multiple books. Advanced Strategic Planning is a very good resource that he gives the audits so people can understand and have very good explanations of what values are and how they can identify their own values. And they have like 3 different ways of sharing, of identifying values collectively as a church. Yes, very effective. Another question. Maybe we had time for a couple. Or not, or we're good. Yes, sir.
Testing.
What's the name of our church?
Of which church?
This church.
This church?
Yeah.
Riverview Adventist? Riverview Community.
That makes a difference.
Oh, it really does. It really does. Thanks for sharing that. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here, to worship together for the divine worship, and also to share a strategic way to reach the next generations in our seminar in the afternoon at 2 p.m. after lunch.